G'day and welcome to the Sea Creatures podcast, a show all about the amazing animals that live beneath the waves. Each episode we chat about a specific sea creature with a guest who has spent time and interacted with this ocean animal. Our guests range from marine biologists to divers to underwater photographers, citizen scientists, and people that have an intense passion for marine life. My name's Matt Testoni and I'm all of the above. And joining me for this episode of the Sea Creatures podcast is Matty Smith, and he's an underwater photographer. And today we're going to be talking all about squid because some of the best squid photos I've ever seen have come from Matty's work. So welcome to the show.
Thanks very much. I'm all of the above too. So I think you just encompassed all of it right there. So that's pretty good. Yeah, nice intro. Thank you very much.
So what kind of led you to take so many cool squid photos, I guess? And I guess most of them would be the southern reef squid or reef squid photos.
Well, to be honest with you, I'd seen quite a few nice shots of squid and I'd not actually ever managed to take any myself. So it was one of those obsession things where you kind of get inspired by other people's work and you think, that's one box I've not ticked. So I kind of made it my mission a few years ago to at least get a good squid shot. And it didn't really take long to learn that the time to do it is going to be at night time, right? Because in the daytime, you occasionally see squid and they can be very sort of shy. They'll never really get close enough to the camera to be able to get a really connective shot or a really sort of interactive shot with a squid. But at nighttime, it's a whole different story. Like you go out there in the dark and you switch a bright white light on and it attracts all kinds of nightlife, basically. So you get all kinds of small little swimming worms and little bait fish and all things like that kind of get attracted to your nightlight like moths to a flame would under a street lamp or something like that, or moths to a light or whatever. And what that does is that really excites the squid, as has soon learned, and they will actually use that to hunt. So they will actually close in on your light and hide in the shadows just out of your torch beam. And then they will come in and attack things that are flashing around in front of your light. So I kind of figured that out and got quite excited about the opportunities. So I started taking quite a few squid pictures and interacting with things and learning just what little characters they are, really. Like they come into your light and they sit there and they look at you as though they're waiting for a feed, or sometimes they come really, really close, like they'll actually swim up between me and my camera. Like I'll be photographing a squid and it kind of goes out of my viewfinder and I'll pull the camera away from my face and it's kind of milling around behind my light or swimming up to my dive mask, and it's just suddenly become your best mate at night time for some, like in the daytime, like I say, you can't get rid of them. At night time, I mean, you can't get close to them. At night time, they're hanging around you like a little entourage. So, and from then I started to get a small portfolio of squid pictures together, but I love symmetry in my photos, right? Okay. So anything that looks symmetrical in a shot, I think it's really eye-catching. So I started to make my mission on a lot of my shots to try and get some symmetry in the photos. So I'd try to angle my body so I'd be head on to the squid so I could get it looking in down the camera barrel. And I found that gives it a lot of personality by doing that. From the side, it looks like a beautiful coloured squid. And I've done some sort of abstract shots of that kind of thing, which I'll talk about in a little while. But when you look at them head on and slightly below, they almost seem to get this face. Like you can see the siphon that they use, which they push water out as part of their jet propulsion system. And it almost looks like a comical mouth below the eyes there. And then the arms, when the arms all stand up on top of the head, it looks like some kind of crazy Simpson character hairstyle. So you very quickly, when you get them square on, start to see these little characters start to appear, which is really fun. And it makes you laugh and then keeps you entertained on a cold winter's night when you're out there in the dark, like some kind of crazy person chasing these things around. So, and you just played with that really, and getting these symmetrical shots of them sort of peering straight down the camera barrel. After I'd got a few images like that, got a nice little collection of all these little characters, I started to try and experiment a little bit more on how I could approach the squid. And the squid have got really interesting skin. So they've got all these colour cells in the skin called chromatophores, which they can expand and contract at will, which is basically, they act like pixels, colour pixels on the squid's skin. So the squid can, say, for instance, and they've got thousands, probably millions of these little chromatophore cells. And at will, the squid can maybe expand the yellow ones and make its skin look yellow, or it can contract the yellow ones and expand the purple ones and make the squid look purple. So they have this beautiful rippling colour that changes quite dramatically, quite quickly. 1 minute you can be looking at this squid that's bright yellow, and then it sort of goes through a green to a purple, and I find that quite interesting, and the whole process of looking closely at the skin as it does that. So So the second part to my squid portfolio, I started to zoom right in close, get really, really close to the squid and shoot these little abstracts of just their arms or just the back or just one of the fins or something like that, just to try and sort of emphasize that texture of that color change on the skin and make it in more detail, I guess, for the viewer to be able to see close up what the skin looks like. The best way to describe it, really, for someone that's not seen one of those close-up pictures is it looks like Aboriginal dot paintings, the dot paintwork. It always reminds me of that. Feels like a very Australian photo. Although squid are found all over the world, it always just makes me feel like I've just walked into an Aboriginal arts centre or something when you look at one close-up.
Yeah, and because the squid are quite translucent, and the squid, we're talking about and we've seen on the coast of Australia, they go up to 30 centimeters in size. And I don't know if you've noticed, but I find sometimes they're like little square pixels and sometimes they're circular ones. And
yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it's amazing how their expression can change in the blink of an eye. Like the arms can be all outstretched and they look like one character. And then I don't know if it's a show of anger or I don't know what it is, but sometimes they'll just wrinkle all the arms up and then they'll go like a bright golden color and they look really angry for a second. And then they'll sort of chill out again and straighten everything out again and look all friendly again. And yeah, they're very, very intriguing little characters. And even individuals seem to have their own characters. Like some will just hang in the shadows and won't let you get close to them. And some will be right in your face.
Yeah. And I mean, one of my favorite little character things I've seen is occasionally you'll get a squid that just likes your light a little bit too much and he gets closer and closer and then tries to grab it and then realizes it's probably not food and jumps back and he always has, or she always has this shocked look like, oh my God,
what was that?
Like, what was that? How dare you fool me with this? And then they do it and they stare at you for like a second and they just fly off like in this angry, pissed off mood. It's fantastic.
Yeah, again, sulk.
Yeah.
No, they're awesome little creatures. I can't get enough of them, and I'm actually quite excited now because in New South Wales, daylight savings finishing this weekend, so which brings night diving back into more sociable hours. So I ain't got to sit up until 9 o'clock at night to get your dive gear on and go for a dive. Like in the coming months, I'll be able to get in the water at sort of 5 p.m., which is great. Get a couple of hours diving and get home for dinner.
Because squid are nocturnal, and I'm not sure how many you usually see, but I usually see them in groups of like 5 to 10 kind of swimming around. Would that be the same for yourself?
Yeah, sometimes singles or sometimes, particularly the really tiny ones, the ones that are a couple of centimeters long, you sometimes get a group of like 20 or 30, and they just look like little alien craft because they all tend to be lined up perfectly, all pointing the same direction, which is generally at you, looking into your lights, and they just look like something, like if Close Encounters of the Third Kind or Star Wars or something, as a whole fleet of starships is lined up. That's what they kind of remind me of, with the sort of eyes glinting in the dark.
Yeah, and because they have such huge eyes. Like I know, a lot of people probably have seen like octopus, and octopus have this like kind of thin slit eye, but squid really do have this huge round bulbous eye. It's amazing,
and it's like a mirror. Like when you hit it with strobe light or underwater flash, if you get it at the wrong angle, it really blows out. It's literally is like trying to take a flash photograph into a mirror sometimes. So for the photographers out there, a little tip, what I tend to do is rather than pointing my strobes either side of the lens straight at the squid, I'll tend to put the strobes on fairly longish arms for macro shots and turn the mint strobes in to face each other in front of the macro lens. So the light's coming at it at a totally different angle. And sometimes when you get those really friendly squid that we were talking about that swim right up to your lens port, if your arms are extended beyond the back of the squid and then pointed slightly back towards the camera, you can get this beautiful backlighting on the squid, which makes them look like glass. Like the whole body texture just seems to change as the light shines through it rather than bounce off it. And it looks like a little glass sculpture with all these little coloured dots on. And it helps with that. You don't get that burnout on the eye of that mirror-like eye. You don't get the strobe burnout on there.
Yeah, and I guess because they are mainly translucent. Yeah, I mean, they're kind of like the ultimate photography subject. Animal that changes colour to all these different ranges is kind of see-through, so you can capture all these different angles. It's just...
Yeah, they're awesome. Like little blown glass bulbs of colour with an attitude.
Do you ever see them feeding at night, or have you ever seen them catch anything?
Yeah, heaps of times. Yeah, like when I've been photographing them, and if you get like a little bait fish swirling around in front of your light, then sometimes the squid will make you jump because you're swimming around and you can't see one, and one will just suddenly come flying in from nowhere and hit a fish, and then just sit there in your light and start eating it. So I do have a few photographs of squid actually sort of devouring fish in the light right in front of me. So you've got, and it's amazing how quick they eat them, right? Like the squid can catch a fish that's probably about a third its size, and it's gone quite quickly. Like they just have it, hold it in their arms, and they're just kind of chewing and chewing and chewing, and it's gone like, in 20 seconds or so. So you got to be really, really quick to get a predatory shot of a squid holding an object that still looks like a fish until, because it very quickly gets chewed up and doesn't look anything recognizable anymore. So you kind of lost the moment. So
yeah, because I think they use their beaks, which are like kind of like a bird beak and quite sharp, just to like almost like scissors. Yeah. They just kind of slice through it. It's crazy.
That's right. Yeah. Very quickly gets eaten. Yeah.
And so you see them at nighttime. Is it a special kind of like, are they on the sand? Are they in a reef or under a pier? Like where are they most common?
It can be all over, really. Like I normally, I don't do particularly deep dives to find them at night. I'll normally just dive in a harbour. So we've got Wollongong Harbour here, which is really good, or I've got another place called Bushrangers Bay, which is a small enclosed bay. And I'm generally just diving in like 3 meters of water. Like you could literally stand up. It's that shallow, just over sandbanks and seagrass beds and things like that. And often they are up high in the water. They're up just under the surface, and sometimes they're down on the seagrass. So they can be all over, really. But yeah, I just generally stick to the shallow water because it tends to be easier to find them in the water column. And I think they do come into the shallows at night to feed more anyway. So through the summer months last year and the year before, when it was too late to night dive in the evenings, I would get up early in the morning and go for a night dive. And I'd get in the water at maybe 5 a.m., an hour before sunrise, and get an hour of shooting the squid. And they'd have all these behaviors that we was talking about, approaching lights and things. But as soon as the water starts to green a little bit and the first rays of light come through, they vanish. Like they're just gone, like nowhere to be seen. So yeah, I think the shallow water is probably a good place to find them, definitely, when you go and looking. And not only the squid, like in Wollongong Harbour, we get these really wonderful bobtail squid as well. And we get these pajama squid, which are more bottom dwellers, but all variants of the similar subjects, really, and all with different behaviors and different patterns on their bodies. And yeah,
you have to describe a pajama squid for us, because the name is very indicative of the animal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is 100%. Yeah, so pajama squid, they look more like a small cuttlefish. So squid tend to be quite elongated, quite long and torpedo-like, whereas cuttlefish and pajama squid, I'm no scientist, so I'm not sure if a pajama squid is truly a squid or whether it is a type of cuttlefish, but it's more rotund, more sort of round and robust looking, I suppose you could say. Shorter arms, fatter body, and they're basically white with black stripes on, like black stripes that run the length of their body rather than across it. So it looks like they're wearing a pair of old school pajamas, and they're really cool looking things. They've got these really great sort of white eyes with like the black slits in, and these long black stripes that run the full length of their body, and they sort of mill around on the sand looking for little crabs and things to eat. Yeah, they're cool little characters. And when they get annoyed with you, they just bury themselves in the sand and they're gone. So yeah, and in the daytime, I think I've only ever seen one pajama squid out and about in the daytime, but at night time in Wollongong Harbour, you lose count how many you see. You see like maybe 10 on a dive, something like that, on an hour's dive. So really, really cool little subjects to shoot, and they're really good actually to experiment with your photographic technique if you want to experiment with different types of snooting or spotlighting or all that kind of thing. They're really, really cool subjects to practice all that on.
Yeah, because they kind of sit on the sand and they stay still for a little bit before they bury themselves.
Yeah, like that's right. Yeah.
Looking at you like, do I really have to hide from you again?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And then they'll bury themselves. And I think the bit I like the best when they bury themselves, particularly the bobtail squid as well, is like they'll sort of push themselves into the sand until just the eyes and the top of the head standing out, and then they'll use two of their arms just to like scoop up the sand all around them and throw it over themselves. It looks kind of funny, kind of cute.
Yeah, because they're just like normal squid. They've got 8 arms and 2 tentacles, I believe, because tentacles are covered in suckers, but arms aren't totally covered, I think.
You're probably right. I don't exactly know. Like I say, I'm not a scientist. I have read, I tried to educate myself when I see something new or find a new photographic subject. I think with the pajama squid, the reason I'm a bit tentative about saying it is I read on a website somewhere that technically they're cuttlefish, and then a scientist friend of mine, I put a post on Instagram about that, and a scientist friend of mine very quickly pulled me up and said, no, they're this or they're that. I won't go into detail because it's a few years ago now and I can't quite remember. I stood corrected.
I did a fair bit of checking out of squid and a bit of research for the podcast.
Yeah.
And I was just bamboozled by the family tree of cephalopods, which are, cuttlefish and squid. And I was like, there's no way. It's just so confusing. And I reckon if it's got a round eye, it's a squid. If it's got a slit eye, it's not a squid. That's my rule of thumb.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and cuttlefish, they're a thing unto themselves as well. I love cuttlefish. So intelligent, a really, really high level of intelligence, I believe, because they show genuine interest in you as a diver. They'll swim, they'll swim over to you and they'll react to you and they'll watch you and move around you. And I think probably my favorite underwater creature actually is the cuttlefish. Yeah. Really, really cool characters.
Yeah, because you get the giant ones. Yeah. Well, we get the giant ones all across the south of Australia, don't we?
That's right, yeah. And of course, you get the really cool giant cuttlefish aggregation down in Whyalla every sort of May till end of July, early August, where I think it's up to about 200,000 giant cuttlefish aggregating at one fairly small bay around Point Lowly, just out of Whyalla. June's the best time. Through May, they're kind of building up, so the numbers are lower and getting more and more and more. Then in June, it's really sort of kicks off, and you've got these huge, really colourful males all fighting for the females and things. But then when you start to move into July and August, they've all been fighting a lot and tearing strips off each other, and they're not in the best photographic prime. They're starting to look a bit beaten up, and a few are starting to die off because as soon as they've mated, they die off. So they start to get looking a bit ordinary, sort of towards August. So June's kind of the sort of seen as the prime month to shoot them when you've got them in all the colourful, boastful sort of prime.
Yeah, because I think squid actually are very similar with their breeding, though. I've heard that they do the same thing. They change color and they have the sneaky male that pretends to be a female to breed. Yeah, but I've never been able to see squid kind of mating. Have you come across it or?
No, not really. No, I've never seen mating squid, although there's a guy that lives at Point Lowly who's become a good friend of mine. He loves the cuttlefish. There's a guy called Carlo. He mentioned that there is a little bay nearby where about the same time of year you can find the squid mating, but I think it's a lot harder. Yeah. I mean, I don't know the details of it. I'm just trying to recall a distant conversation I had with him probably 3 or 4 years ago about the squid there. And I don't think it's quite as predictable or spectacular as the cuttlefish goings on there, which is just incredible. Like I say, I think there's 200,000 giant cuttlefish, which can be up to a metre long and weigh 10 kilos. So they're not small animals in this one bay. And they're right up to the point where they're almost beaching themselves. So sometimes when you're there and you're getting changed into your dive gear, someone will come along that's not dived there before looking for the cuttlefish. And they'll go, where do I find the cuttlefish? And you just go, you won't miss them. Just walk down there, put your fins on them. Before you've even got your fins and your mask on, there'll be male cuttlefish fighting around your knees. Literally, the floor is carpeted with them. You just cannot miss them. It really is a sight to behold. It's one of nature's wonders, definitely. It's an amazing thing to watch, and take plenty of memory cards with you and hard drive space for download, because you come back with a lot of pictures.
Yeah, I mean, it's just got me thinking because, as I said, I was researching the squid. And have you heard in America, similar squid, they do what the cuttlefish do, but on a mass scale deep off a channel at about 40 meters. Yeah, I wonder if the same thing as the giant cuttlefish is actually happening with the squid along the coast. It would be something cool to kind of try and find, I reckon.
Yeah, it could. Yeah, it'd be very good. Yeah. How big are the squid? Are they?
They're about up to 30 centimeters. So
I think there's a big one in Japan, actually. There's some bioluminescent squid. I saw a photograph once by a really, really great photographer called Brian Scarry. And it was loads and loads of, I think it was Brian Scarry. I hope it was now I said that. There was loads and loads of these bioluminescent squid carcasses all washed up on a beach. and the whole beach is just like glowing blue, and it's all these dead squid. And I'm pretty sure it's Japan, where they'd all just finished mating and washed up. It almost looks like those bioluminescent tides we get around southern Australia, you know, of the bioluminescent algae that we get, but it was squid bodies, and it's quite an amazing photograph.
And so on the other end of the spectrum, have you ever come across squid eggs and like real baby squid?
Yeah, I've seen quite a few squid eggs. Like you see them hanging like bunches of white bananas, generally around sea sponges and things like sea tulips, that kind of thing. They like to lay them, tunicates and stuff. Like you get these, like they look like bunches of small white bananas, maybe 3-4 centimeters long, I guess, depending on the species of squid. Yeah, I've seen quite a few of those, and quite a few little tiny baby squid. Like I've never seen a squid hatch. Like I've seen some really cool photographs of fully developed squid inside eggs and things like that. I've always kind of really wanted to get one, but I've never got one. In fact, I've seen some really cool photos of flamboyant cuttlefish hatching, coming out of the eggs. Now, flamboyant cuttlefish are just like about the size of a grape at the biggest, but they just look like perfect little miniature, very colourful cuttlefish. They live up to the name flamboyant because they're kind of like raspberry red and like grape purple and orange and white, yellow, and their bodies just ripple with all those colors, like, you know, some kind of psychedelic color show when you see one of those walking across the sand. Unfortunately, they're in the tropics. You have to go up to places like the Philippines to see them, but amazing little creatures. And I have seen photographs of those hatching out of these little translucent eggs. I wouldn't know how big the eggs are, but judging by the size of the fully grown adult, their eggs must be tiny. And it's funny because as soon as they pop out the egg, they start doing that crazy flamboyant color show that they're famous for right from the get-go. So that would be another one on the hit list one day, with enough time and money in the world to get all these photos.
Yeah, and I've seen the footage where because they're, I think inside the egg, they're quite plain looking. And then apparently I was told that how you can get a good photo of them because just before they hatch, they start that color change, as you said. Yeah. So if you look at a bunch of eggs and you see one that's suddenly going purple, you go, oh, quick, film that one.
It's going to go. Yeah, right. One day. Yeah. And the ones, actually, you do see quite a few eggs. When you get to giant cuttlefish migration, you see a few cuttlefish eggs there, random ones that have dislodged from under the rocks. And if you're really lucky, you'll see some laid under the rocks that the females have put there. But they're kind of like teardrop shaped. So they're thick at one end and thin at the other. And they just hang there on little bunches under the rocks like little bells or whatever. I don't think they get fully formed baby cuttlefish in them until kind of end of November time or something like that. I've never really seen it photographed.
Yeah, and I've seen that once actually locally in Melbourne. And at the time, I thought it was some kind of weird sponge or sticky weird thing that I, peered under and saw this cuttlefish next to these teardrop things, as you said. And I was like, oh, what's that kind of weird? Because sponges often have that, sometimes tendrily kind of things. And yeah, later on, a year later, I looked at the photo. I was like, no, that's actually the eggs.
Yeah, that's the eggs. Yeah.
Like
little white sort of teardrop-shaped pearls.
Yeah. So just before we start to wrap up, back to squid. Yep. Do you have any really cool stories or your favorite memory of a squid encounter?
I think probably the shot I got that was featured in the Australian Geographic Awards back in, I believe, about 2016. And it's a squid. It's one of the symmetrical ones that I was talking about earlier on that literally came right up to the minimum focus distance of my 60mm lens. So really, really close to my camera. And at that kind of close distance, it's really hard to get a shot in focus because things coming out in and out of focus at that close distance really easy. And I was trying to get underneath it. I wanted a shot looking up underneath the squid, which you really see. Again, trying to get something a little bit different. And I was kind of almost lying on my back on the seabed in about 3 meters of water. And it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, like on a summer's morning. I've been in the water since like 4 a.m. or something ridiculous like that. And that one came, and it just swam straight over the top of me. And I remembering not to exhale, because as soon as you exhale, all the bubbles go straight up through your shot when you're in that position, because obviously you're lying on your back looking up. So, and it swam over and it swam perfectly and just slowly swam up to my camera lens and sort of peered straight down the barrel, perfectly symmetrical, square on. And I took a few shots. And in one of the shots, the one that I used, its siphon's wide open, so it looks like its big shocked mouth, and it looks like it's peering down the lens with a really shocked look on its face, but almost in a comical, friendly sort of way. And actually, it was used in the Australian Geographic Awards. And then when I was there, the editor-in-chief approached me and said, we really wanted to use that on the cover of the next issue. But because it was a horizontal landscape orientation shot and the way it was framed, she said the designer had spent hours and hours and hours trying to make the cover work with this photo, and they just couldn't get the writing to fit around it right, and eventually they scrapped the idea. So I kind of wish she hadn't told me that. I was just like, well, that's kind of like, yeah, that's almost mean saying we was going to use it on the cover, but then we didn't. But no, it was nice to know anyway. But
yeah. Cool. Well, thanks heaps for coming along and chatting to us today. If anyone wants to see any of these amazing photos which you've mentioned, where should they go and what should they do?
Probably the best thing to do is just head to my Instagram page, which is at Matty Smith Photo with double T, Matty, Smith Photo. And that's where I post most of my work. A lot of the stuff I use maybe commercially, so it doesn't get straight onto Instagram, but certainly there is an overflow of pictures that go on there, and it's kept more up to date than anywhere else. So it'd be a great place to meet people and have a look. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for being on the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Matt. It's been a pleasure.
Sea Creatures Podcast is hosted, edited, and produced by myself, Matt Testoni. Stay up to date with all things Sea Creatures Podcast by visiting the Sea Creatures Podcast Instagram, which is SeaCreatures_podcast, or my own photography page, which is Matt_Testoni_photography. Production assistance by George McGrath, and music by the talented Dan Musil and his amazing slide guitar. If you like the show, jump onto our Patreon account where you can give a small monthly donation to help with the running costs of the program. That's patreon.com/SeaCreaturesPodcast. Coming up next time on the Sea Creatures Podcast, we're going to be talking to Sam Riley all about leatherback sea turtles with some amazing facts. This has been the Sea Creatures Podcast. Over and out.